On this episode of China Uncensored, long may Xi Jinping reign. Seriously, he might be reigning for a long time. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Big news for Chinese leader Xi Jinping. He could become China's president for life.
The Communist Party this weekend announcing a proposal to scrap the two-term limit for presidents, meaning Xi Jinping could stay on indefinitely.
Changes to the Constitution in the last year have made Xi the most powerful Chinese leader since Mao Zedong, the founder of the People's Republic, who died in office having never retired.
Retirement? Xi is only 64. It's way too early to think about retirement. Yes, as Chinese netizens have pointed out, Xi Jinping has found what he loves and is sticking with it. Netizens have always noticed a more than passing similarity between Xi Jinping and Winnie the Pooh. But after this latest news, some of the Pooh Bear memes on China's internet are difficult to decipher. I wonder what this one means. But weirdly, Chinese authorities don't seem to have a sense of humor about this. Censors have once again banned references to Winnie the Pooh on China's internet. You know what else they banned? The phrase, "I disagree." So fellas, if you're in China, now's the time to hit up your crush on WeChat and ask her out. She can't disagree. Of course, if we're talking Winnie the Pooh, I'm definitely the wise owl, since I predicted this in 2016. There's still more power Xi can grab. And if he gets it, then what? Well, he may use it to stay in power beyond the year 2022, when, according to supposed precedent, he would step down because he will have served 2 5-year terms. You know, not quite a president or a dictator, more of a Presitator. You know, there are times when saying, "I told you so," leaves a bitter taste in the mouth. This is not one of those times. I told you so! Presitator for life, baby! Pass me some of that honey. I believe we have a clip of Xi Jinping's response.
Oh, I just can't wait to be king.
Wow, it's amazing how much of our childhood is a metaphor for tyranny. Now, the end to presidential term limits is not set in stone. It's a constitutional amendment proposed by the Central Party Committee. It still needs to be approved later this month by a vote from China's National People's Congress. So there's still a good chance that... No, this is set in stone. The National People's Congress has never rejected a law that the party or government has put before it. Now that's called loyalty. Or maybe Congress is just banned from using the phrase, "I disagree." But from a larger perspective, this move shouldn't really come as a surprise. See, getting rid of term limits doesn't really change the Chinese political system. It just exposes what the system has been all along. There's a myth that after Mao died, the Chinese Communist Party ruled China through consensus. No. They actually ruled China using power struggles. The goal has always been to hold on to power as long as you can. And the guy in charge is the one who actually has control, not necessarily the guy with the title. In the 1980s and 90s, Deng Xiaoping never held the top title, but he was supreme leader, even while Jiang Zemin was nominally the head of the CCP. And then, after Jiang Zemin technically stepped down as president in 2003, Jiang hung on to power behind the scenes throughout the entire 10-year presidency of the next guy, Hu Jintao. In fact, 15 years later, Jiang Zemin is still so powerful behind the scenes that Xi Jinping has been using his anti-corruption campaign to purge Jiang Zemin's power base. So Xi Jinping getting rid of presidential term limits is basically just him being transparent about his plans to stay in power. CCP politics is often called a black box. It's like the power struggle within the CCP is a wrestling match going on in a completely dark room. It's really hard to see what's going on. Now, Xi Jinping is turning on the lights. On second thought, maybe turn them off again. I'm not sure anyone wants to see that. So anyway, the constitutional amendment that gets rid of presidential term limits is going to pass with a likelihood of roughly 100%. The amendment also gets rid of vice presidential term limits. Remember this guy, Wang Qishan? He's Eeyore. Wang was Xi Jinping's anti-corruption czar. He was forced to retire from top party leadership, the Politburo Standing Committee, last October because of his age. That seemed like a big loss for Xi, but it was actually a slick move, because technically you don't have to be in the Politburo to hold a high position in government. So Xi is going to bring Wang back to power, this time as the new vice president of the government. Or as you might call him, Vice Presitator. And now he and Xi Jinping never have to say goodbye. There are other changes to the country's constitution too, besides getting rid of term limits for president and vice president. Xi Jinping thought will also be added, just like it got added to the Communist Party's constitution in October. The rule of the Communist Party is emphasized just to remind everyone that the government isn't really the one in charge. And it will also establish the National Supervision Commission. The National Supervision Commission is basically Xi Jinping and Wang Qishan's anti-corruption campaign on steroids. Already, his campaign has purged more than 1.5 million corrupt Communist Party officials. Wait, and now it's time to add the steroids? How many corrupt officials could possibly be left to purge? Don't worry, there's still several million more. And this corruption-purging National Supervision Commission will have the added benefit of being above the Chinese legal system. Yes, having it be subject to the rule of law would just slow it down. Being outside the law, it has power to detain people without having to waste time on show trials. In fact, Xi Jinping has invented a new kind of detention just for party officials. He's calling it liuzhi.
Liuzhi is an original creation of China, which has never been used in other countries in the world.
And this liuzhi replaces the previous illegal system of detaining party officials, which was called shuanggui. The Chinese Communist Party finding new ways to throw people in jail since 1949. But again, none of this should be surprising. When Xi Jinping came to power, he immediately was in the middle of a life-or-death power struggle with former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin. That's why he spent the last 5+ years purging all his rivals tied to Jiang and amassing power. If he didn't, he'd get purged himself. So, has Xi Jinping won now? Does abolishing term limits mean that he's gotten rid of Jiang's faction and is now the supreme ruler of the CCP, just like Mao? Well, Xi Jinping may have the kitschy merchandise, but that doesn't mean he's just like Mao. Think about it. Why abolish term limits now, when Xi is only at the beginning of his second 5-year term? Why not wait for a couple more years when he has more power? Here's one reason. Xi has no successor. This is a key part of the CCP's power struggles. Deng was powerful enough to appoint Jiang and then Hu as his successors. But neither Jiang nor Hu were powerful enough to appoint the next leader, so they were forced to compromise. So now, Xi needs a successor. But if he can't control who that is, then he could lose the power struggle. How? Well, officials who don't like Xi might otherwise just try to wait him out, hoping the next guy will be better. But now, Xi has abolished term limits. That's a signal that he's in this for the long haul, so officials had better fall in line. But Xi isn't Mao. He's still in the process of consolidating power. And there are signs he's only just getting to the level of power Jiang Zemin once had. In a way, the National Supervision Commission is Xi Jinping's version of Jiang Zemin's 610 office. Only instead of focusing on detaining innocent Falun Gong practitioners, it's detaining corrupt party officials. Which at least is a less bad use of a scary, illegal detention system, although it would be much better to not have the scary, illegal detention system at all. So now that Xi Jinping has managed to get unlimited terms in office and is bringing back his anti-corruption czar and is creating the National Supervision Commission, what's next? Well, it's kind of hard to tell. Can someone turn on the lights? So what do you think of China's new Presitator for life? Remember, you can't disagree. Leave your comments below. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time. Do you like these in-depth episodes on Chinese politics? We can keep making them because viewers like you are directly funding China Uncensored. Support our team of researchers and writers. Click the orange button to visit our Patreon website and learn how you can contribute.